Thank you very much, Scott. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. And for etectRx, the idea of a digital pill came to be more than a decade ago. And like many of you who have dedicated your lives to clinical development, it took many, many years of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of resources, and a lot of mind share to develop that idea into a feasible product and something that we're offering today. And it's very exciting. We're excited to be able to share that with all of you, a little bit about the journey, but more about what we have to offer today. And it really is an idea whose time has come. And we know the time has come for digital pills. And hope to share that enthusiasm and optimism with you today. And really in the backdrop of COVID-19 and what that has brought to the clinical trial space and the way that we conduct our work, as well as the tremendous need for reliable adherence measurement in clinical trials and the evolving landscape around that. It's very exciting to stand here today with an innovation like this and an actual product that has been validated and be able to start the conversation with all of you about what digital pills can do for you and your trials. I'm going to take 1 minute to talk a little bit about digital transformation of medication adherence and to springboard off of Scott's comments. And we're all experiencing our own digital revolutions. The pace of adoption has been extraordinary, and regulatory acceptance of the movement has been also helped to promote that momentum. And it's very exciting. We're enabling engagement with nearly every important product in our lives. We're connected to our cars, we're connected to our homes, very much connected to my kids, and it's amazing the level of connection with my grill and the dinner on it, as well as my kids' bats connected to their coaches in very new ways. And it's enabled new conversations and really a data-rich environment in which we can learn and understand and operate. Clinical trials are ready for digital adherence, and they do suffer from a lack of transparency and accountability with regard to medication use. We'll talk a little more about that. And they also suffer from a lack of reliable data on adherence to study drug. There's really a very striking example of how non-adherence has impacted clinical trials, and that is the VOICE Phase 2b trial. And that trial involved 5,029 HIV-negative women. The surprising piece of the adherence, they tracked adherence in that study, but did so using self-reports, and 90% of the doses were self-reported to be taken. When they looked at pill counts, 86% of prescribed doses were actually taken. When they pulled blood samples, only 30% of those samples showed detectable drug in blood. And that study was ended due to futility. It was stopped early, and that was squarely laid on the shoulders of non-adherence. And there are countless other examples of how variability in adherence has also impacted studies and study outcomes. I don't need to spend much time with this group about the world that you live in, which is the top right. The risks associated with clinical development and the burden that you have in making those proof points and bringing that to bringing a product to market. And the primary source of failure in an analysis of 640 novel drugs that entered pivotal trials was an inability to demonstrate efficacy. And more than half of those products never made it to a clearance and approval. And more than half of them had the reason associated with them of inability to demonstrate an efficacy. The leading reason for delays in regulatory approval is the selection of an optimal dose regimen. And we feel that the digital pill can open up new opportunities for you to connect medication use with exposure to the drug product with the outcomes that you're assessing in clinical trials, and really take another look at that exposure and response relationship and how real-world medication use impacts that. Scott mentioned the environment in which we're operating. We've seen delays, disruptions, and redesigns of clinical studies that have taken us in new directions over the last several months. We've seen new ways of delivering health, social distancing, and health distancing, and the majority of routine visits and study visits are now virtual. And we think this is going to be the case for a while, and because of digital enablers and the pace of adoption of those, we are better equipped to handle some of those changes and some of those challenges, and working to very quickly partner and get those in place. When we come back to the patient wants to advance medical research, and we're really entrusted with their experience to be able to capture the information about that experience and to use it for the most good. And our tool helps do that in an easy way for the patient to be able to present their experience and their interaction with that product. And so we do envision a time when we are connected to medication, when we have an opportunity using our technology to look at how individuals at a patient level, which is a very personalized experience, and also at a dose level, interact with medication over a long period of time in real time, and to have a view of that and an understanding of that unlike any other technology can bring. We'll spend a minute on the problem of medication non-adherence, and that is a $300 billion problem that our country and our world faces with respect to taking of medication in the right way, in the most appropriate way, and for the best outcomes. And in clinical trials, it's no different. You have a set of patients, you provide them with an investigational product. Those bring with them their own variables, their own cognitive behavioral approaches to adherence, and there's a lot of work that's been done on that. And then you put them in the home and you ask them to take their medication in the home and to self-administer that medication. And that comes with a lot of mystery and unknowns and complexity and context-specific changes over time. If you're looking at how to longitudinally follow that patient and understand what's happening with them and the interaction between the medication and that individual. And finally, we layer on top the perfect storm of COVID-19 pandemic and the distractions and disruptions that take place not only in normal life, but in our current lives, and as it's evolving and playing out over time, and when your studies are going to be starting in the next several weeks and months. And there are different ways that patients are interacting with healthcare providers, with study sites and health interventions, and we're working to help best layer our technology on it and help you understand that and its impact. The current status quo, the way we're doing things in clinical research to try to report adherence, are not working. We have pill counts, we ask the patient, we ask the clinician to assess what that medication use looks like, and sometimes we provide them with some clues and sometimes we don't. But that is not the rigor with which we should be approaching clinical trials, nor the fidelity of information and accuracy with which we need to be reporting how people are taking the medication and the investigational product, or how they're being used from a time, a frequency, a dosing interval, or a utilization pattern. So it's with this in the background, and with COVID-19 pandemic swirling and the digital revolution in which we're in which we are bringing digital pills. And we never could have scripted that this year would look like it did, and that we'd be bringing the market something that is of such need right now and has proven to be of need. And just happy to be involved in this conversation and to be here to be able to bring this to you and your studies and patients in need. So we'll start with a little bit of background around what is a digital pill, and tell you what our system looks like. And a digital pill is an oral dosage form that contains an ingestible sensor inside of a pill. It reports when it's taken, and that sensor transmits data after it is consumed. And they may do so in different ways. We'll tell you a little bit about that, but the digital pill communicates once it gets into the body and communicates specifically that it was taken. That sensor and the signal from it links wirelessly through intra-body communication to an external recorder. That really is the basis for a digital pill system. The Code of Federal Regulations classification, you'll see the FDA classification referenced down below. Officially, a digital pill system is called an ingestible event marker. It marks ingestion events, logs tracks and trends, intake times, and lets you get a very reliable picture of medication adherence. Quick history of some market milestones that are notable and stretches back 60 plus years here when the first swallowable electronic device was made. That was 1957. And a lot has happened since then. The last 20 years have been really a period of incredible design and development with regard to digital pills. Two digital pill companies were founded in 2001 and 2009, and that really kicked off the development of products. In 2012, Proteus launched the first FDA-cleared digital pill system, almost a decade after they were founded. etectRx was founded in 2009, so we began our journey about 11 years ago into this space. But Proteus launched in 2012. They launched their digital pill system. We saw some additional advancements. The first FDA-cleared ingestible pill camera came out by Given Imaging in 2014. 2017, we saw the first digital medicine that was launched through a collaboration of Otsuka and Proteus. And that product received FDA approval in 2017 and has been marketed since. In 2019, almost a decade after we were founded, etectRx received FDA clearance of our capsule-based digital pill system. And we'll shed some light on what that looks like and where we are. The FDA-cleared IDCAP system consists of 4 components, and this entire system, including each of those 4 components, was submitted to the FDA and presented to the FDA for review and clearance. And we'll take a minute of time to talk through those. Each element was designed very thoughtfully and in a way to ensure that it met its intended use and has been verified and validated, each of the components individually as well as the system altogether. And we'll tell you a little bit about what that process looked like for us. Very rigorous because we have an ingestible component, a wearable component, patient-facing app, and finally a clinician-facing app to be able to digest the information that's coming from the device. We'll start on the left-hand side. The ID capsule is the first and foundational component of our system. It is a USP pharmaceutical-grade capsule shell that we've purchased from one of the leading global manufacturers of capsule shells. And the difference in our capsule shell and a standard capsule is that the body of that capsule shell is lined with our ingestible sensor. It is able to be used to over-encapsulate a dosage form. And we provide it in a tentatively joined state, just like any other capsule that would be provided. But that ingestible sensor is already embedded into the capsule shell. The sensor, once it hits the stomach, is activated. We have a battery that is essentially naturally activated, and it turns on and generates a low-power radio frequency signal that goes out. And because of our advanced in-body communication platform that has been developed by incredible people within the company, that signal is able to reliably transmit through the body. We can get messages in and out of the body very easily, and the message from this ingestible sensor reliably transmits out and can even transmit, importantly, off the body. And so that is something unique to our system and actually helps in terms of the accuracy of the reads that we get and the reliability of the readings that we get of the signals coming off of that. And it allows a lot of flexibility in the reader that we have. And that's the second panel right there. Our reader is a transceiver that picks up the signal from the capsule after it's been ingested from the ingestible sensor, and picks up that signal, detects it as a pill message, and proceeds to process that signal and confirm an ingestion event has occurred. It is currently in a lanyard-based form. We started in some of our early development with a patch, quickly realized there were more acceptable patient form factors for that reader, and we have a lanyard-based reader that's been used and presented to the FDA and ready for use now. The patient-facing mobile app is that third component. So the reader actually communicates the information. It stores the data about pill messages and ingestion events, communicates that information to the patient-facing app. And the patient has an opportunity to see what their ingestion history looks like. We can also use this without our dedicated app and have gotten clearance for that as well. And we are able to integrate with other apps. If you have a brand app or a disease state app that you're looking to use, we can simply integrate our data into that app to facilitate the understanding of the ingestions of that patient and adherence of that patient. Clinician Dashboard is a web-based portal that the clinician can use to view the ingestions as they occur in real time. And Dr. Peter Chai, who's used the system in a number of his studies, will talk with you a little bit, show you some glimpses of what that looks like. But the important thing is the data goes from the mobile app to the cloud. The cloud enables us to be able to integrate those data and allow you or others to view them in the dashboard. But it also allows integration into any clinical trial management system. And we have successfully integrated with some of the larger ones on the scale of Oracle and RedCap, and some also smaller to mid-sized data aggregators that we've worked with that are either using the system for a unique integrated data display or for a patient engagement type solution in a patient engagement platform. That integration takes us days, and not months. And so we're very flexible and willing to build that in. And we know that adherence data complements a variety of other device-driven data and other data points that are coming through. The digital pill system from etectRx, as mentioned, has been cleared by FDA. Last December, we received a clearance, and a variety of pivotal trials and human factors validation studies and biocompatibility studies, electrical safety studies comprise that package that went to the FDA. We received full clearance on all of those four components that I mentioned in the system, and have a number of studies that have also supported the utilization and validated the feasibility and acceptability of the technology. We currently have 15 IRB approved clinical studies. The one that was completed most recently showed 98% of ingestions were recorded with proper use, and that was 924 reader detected ingestions that were captured in patients taking PrEP therapy. We have over 5,900 ingestions in more than 285 study participants worth of data that we're happy to communicate. This doesn't allow us to really present that to you, but we're happy to do so. We have a strong foundation of intellectual property with 14 issued patents and a number of other pending patents. And really, as mentioned earlier, an industry-leading product roadmap that is enabled by our eBurst platform communication technology and allows us to create readers that are off the body, including anywhere that the patient can wear it, and including the wrist, and also looking at the future of an invisible reader that is seamlessly integrated into the patient's life. You'll see a quote there from Dr. Castillo-Mancilla, one of our partners over at University of Colorado, about the technology being a game changer because there's unequivocal proof of medication ingestion by the patient and correlations that can be made of adherence to drug concentrations. And we appreciate our work with he and Ryan out there. And well, we're happy to share that experience as well in HIV treatment and aligning adherence with blood levels. Quick highlight of the value of digital pills for you and your trials. We feel they fall into four categories. The data that you can obtain, the knowledge that you can get from it, the patient experience in terms of connectivity and engagement, and implementation in more efficiently putting together a trial. And I'll try to hit these very quickly so we can move forward. The data, I mentioned the unequivocal confirmation that study participants are taking their medication and how and when they're taking it. The system allows you reliable electronic adherence records and confidence in your study data, a level of rigor and accuracy in adherence that can help your entire data set. The patient-level understanding of real-world use and actionable insights that you can get from it will help more accurately estimate the drug benefits and risks. And the patient engagement and the doors that this opens in terms of patient centricity and engaging the patient on a strong platform of meaningful and reliable information is some of the most exciting that we've seen in working with our investigators. It's really opened their eyes to how the product is used and challenged a lot of the assumptions that have been made. And in terms of implementation, with real-time information, this enables faster and better decisions, enables you to reach a new population, remote users and others, an underserved population that may not have been able to be engaged, because now you can confirm use. And then also look at hopefully decreasing sample sizes, which we know are overpowered for to take into account non-adherence and variable adherence. We have examples of 4 studies in each of these areas. Peter will talk about the 2 on the left, which are studies in PrEP adherence. The top left is to track PrEP adherence on a daily basis. The bottom left is to use that information. The study that we're working on with Brigham and Fenway is to use that information for the most good for PrEP adherence. And that has been an interesting collaboration to work with the researchers there, Dr. Chai and his team, to understand how the cognitive and behavioral elements impact the patient's use of the product, and to reinforce their use of PrEP therapy to be able to intervene when the patterns are shifting and things are changing, and to be able to understand why those changes are occurring and what we can do to better support adherence in those patients. On the top right, there's a quantification aligning the objective adherence from our device with blood levels and outcomes, viral loads in those patients. And that's an HIV treatment study. It's one of our largest studies of 180 subjects that are followed each for 4 months. And a lot of exciting work that we can't wait to share with you and that you'll be hearing about in the near future. And we have an oxycodone study that has also been done to look at oxycodone ingestion patterns and offers new level of accountability for both providers and patients with respect to that. There are a tremendous amount of data that are out there about digital pills in clinical trials, and there are publications too numerous to list in each of these therapeutic areas. They're the ones that you would think of because the need for adherence measurement is greatest in these areas where there's a adherence is directly tied to outcomes, whether they be efficacy or tolerability or safety. There are the need for high costs in tracking accountability of product that goes out with high cost agents or significant events that are occurring as a result of non-adherence. And a lot of work that Otsuka has done as well in behavioral health and understanding of how a digital medicine can be brought to a market in great need. But I did want to clarify in our FDA indication, the IDCAT system can be used in any instance where quantifiable analysis of ingestion events is desirable. And that rules in any clinical trial in which medications and oral medications are used. The last point that I will make is that we stand here as a company with a validated product, with experience in operationally using that product in partnership with others, looking for opportunities to do the most good with our technology. And we need partners such as all of you who are willing to jump in and work with us to find that right place in terms of therapeutic alignment, in terms of product, in terms of patient population, to apply the technology and to understand where the needs are. And here's some examples of where we see that in oncology, neurological diseases like Parkinson's and MS, and infectious disease, where we have a depth of experience on the HIV side, but also hepatitis C. There are just some examples here of some partner applications in using a tool such as ours and digital pills to differentiate your product, to defend in the marketplace, to address challenging dosing and dose-related toxicity and how real-world use is impacting outcomes in oncology. To look at PK and PD experiences with products. Neurological diseases are rich with device captured data, electronic data, patient-reported outcomes, and that's one where we believe adherence informed data analyses will be tremendous for the field. Hepatitis C, there are applications of our technology for the benefit of at-risk stakeholders looking to improve adherence in an area where you're actually looking at cure. And so we'd love to work on any of these demonstration projects with you. These are some that our partners are working with us to brainstorm, and we have flexibility, as I mentioned. The product has versatility in terms of applications, and we have flexibility in terms of how we want to execute with you based on your needs and your applications. And so I will ask to reach out to us. We have a gold standard adherence measurement system that's waiting for your use. We can brainstorm opportunities, but we would prefer to leave that in your hands since you know your branding, your development, your product. We're ready to conduct collaborative demonstration projects and finally to bring digital medicine to life here. And I think now is the time to act. So look forward to hearing from you and hopefully stopping the conversation about the impact, the significant impact of non-adherence and variability in adherence, and bringing some solutions to life. Please reach out. I'll turn it over to Scott to launch back to Peter so we can hear that.
Thank you for that. One of the comments in the Q&A thing was fascinating, and indeed that was. Thank you very much. And for your quote there, I think you're right. Well done is better than well said, and well done and well said on your part there. That was very informative. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chai, and he's going to speak about his direct experience with the etectRx digital pill platform. So Dr. Chai, you can advance your slides, and we'll look forward to hearing what your experience has been.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Peter. I am an emergency medicine physician, and I've had a longstanding interest in ingestible electronic systems, and have had the great pleasure, really, of collaborating with etectRx for almost 5 years now, looking at a variety of ways in which ingestible sensors can really change the way we think about doing clinical trials, and also looking at how this data really changes the way we think about adherence, and building new spaces to boost and consider adherence in general. So just a few research disclosures. A lot of the work that we do here is funded by the NIH. I also have grants from Gilead looking at HIV prevention and PrEP adherence using these ingestible sensor devices. And we'll try to keep this brief. I think, the big question for everybody who's participating here is, I think someone had a great comment in the Q&A. This is really fascinating information and a really exciting device, but, why use it in a clinical trial? And, what really, if it's something that people are interested in, what does it really take to operationalize something like this? And this is something we've done before in the early days with etectRx, looking at opioid administration and ingestion patterns, and then moving from there to even more kind of increased, I guess I'd call it increased sophistication nowadays, with looking at HIV prevention and how we look at adherence and think about different patterns that this kind of technology is really opening up for the very first time. And then we'll talk a little bit. I think one of the things I always harp on a lot is, once we put in a new wearable or a new device into a clinical trial, I think it's very important that we kind of differentiate between adherence to technology versus adherence to your medication or your study. And then whatever else wants to come up in the future. I think this is a really exciting and interesting space that is going to open a lot of doors for a lot of different kind of studies in the future here. So everybody knows that there's the reason we're here is because of medication non-adherence. It's a huge financial problem in the United States, but from a clinical trial perspective, it's also a huge problem. This is a graph, mock graph of a patient in a clinical trial, and the way we wish that people would take medications in a clinical trial is probably just read ideal dosing, where someone's taking the same medication at the same time every day. You generate this great kind of a PK curve, and you have a pretty smooth peak of drug, and then you can really look at your primary outcome. Everyone knows in the real world, this isn't what happens. People take medications at different times. There's lapses, people forget. And so, you end up with a lot of these peaks and valleys. You end up with potential drug toxicity and potential lack of efficacy given the changes in these adherence patterns. And then I guess the big problem here is that over time in a clinical trial, obviously, adherence is going to wane. So people may be engaged and interested in the beginning of your study, but as the time goes on, adherence also wanes, and people become frankly not adherent, and that's a big financial problem as well. So the cost of over enrolling, or as people who do clinical trials, we always think of enrolling extra participants just to make sure that we get to where we want to be at. That cost, depending on the phase of study and the investigational drug or the product that you're looking at, can be quite expensive. So I think this is all to echo what Susan had said, is that adherence is a big problem. I think a lot of us recognize it, and the question is, how do we really do something about it in, I think, an unobtrusive way in which these study participants really become partners with us in these clinical trials. So, really thinking about adherence technologies, there's this new digital pill that we've discussed, and then there's other things. There's things like these smart pill bottles. There's other technologies and techniques to measure adherence. And I think one of the big distinctions here is that the digital pill and the ID cap here is really, one of the few ways in which we can conduct real-time direct measures of adherence. A lot of these techniques that we've used before, including things like these smart pill bottles, pill counts, having a patient keep a diary, these are all what we like to call indirect measures of adherence. So they indirectly allow you to infer that someone has taken their medication, but when you come down to kind of the truth of it, the ground truth of it, you never really know that somebody took their medication, right? And you can think of this, I think the common example is you give a patient a smart pill bottle, and every time you open the pill bottle, you're supposed to have taken a medication, but everybody knows that you can open your pill bottle many times and not take a medication. These digital pills I think are unique because they are relatively unobtrusive, and at the same time, they really provide a direct measure of adherence. Before this type of technology, we were stuck with directly observed therapy and a study nurse or a study staff member actually watching someone take their medication if that was the degree of rigor that we want to have. And so the ability to use this ingestible sensor that essentially is powered by the human body, it has an unobtrusive reader that I think over time will become even more unobtrusive and kind of melt into the background, really makes this technology just like taking your medication, like every normal day of somebody's life. And I think that's where this is going, and that's what the value of this technology is in a clinical trial. I think with the shadow of COVID around us as well, we've all been thinking about how we can conduct a lot of this work remotely, and I think adherence is going to be another big problem that we need to think about. And the ability to kind of query and look at these things remotely with an ingestible sensor, I think, is a huge benefit here. Every time I talk about this, people are like, wow, it's a really cool thing, but who's ever going to use this technology? It's crazy. It's like swallowing a robot or a microchip, right? And so we've done a lot of work looking at patient acceptance. And so one of the studies that Susan mentioned that we did, funded by Gilead, where we actually interviewed a lot of individuals looking at PrEP, so pre-exposure prophylaxis against HIV. And we asked them, frankly, would you use it? And what are the design considerations that are really worrisome for you? And I think it was really fascinating when you talk to potential study participants. I think that this is such a interesting, novel idea that people just really glom onto it and they like it. And so I think we have that going for us, and that this is a really cool tool that I think that is very acceptable to patients. A lot of our study participants told us that they thought about this as essentially just taking their medication. And the idea, I think one of the big concerns that we had was the ability of people to kind of fathom swallowing a microchip. That doesn't seem to be that big of an issue to people. And so people will use it. With the caveat that a lot of this was interview data and asking patients theoretically. In this study that was funded by Gilead, what we did after this is we actually enrolled a subset of individuals in a clinical trial where we asked them to swallow an ingestible sensor every day for 3 months. And as Susan alluded to, we had about a 98% adherence rate. I think a really cool part here is that not only do you look at adherence, but you can look at patterns and how people take medications. On the left side of the slide here is one of our first studies that we did where we enrolled patients who had acute pain in the emergency department. So think of your chaotic, busy emergency department where I get to work. And we taught people how to use the ID cap system at the bedside in about 5 or 10 minutes. So it's a pretty short training program, and we gave them opioids. We gave them oxycodone for a week. These are patients who had operative and non-operative fractures that they saw us in the emergency department for. And everybody was able to use it, which I thought was really fascinating. Not only that, we really uncovered really interesting patterns that you can look for using an ingestible sensor. So from our opioid study, we actually were able to look at changes in opioid ingestion patterns over time and changes in pain. And so this is kind of one application you can think about in a clinical trial where you're potentially looking at something that's more PRN and how people use these medications in the real world. On the right side are some clinician-facing interfaces that we use today in one of our PrEP studies. And so, this is an example, and I'll show you a little bit more of this data in a little bit, of patients who are essentially, the x-axis is days of the week and the y-axis is time of the day, and you can look and glance pretty quickly and see that a lot of people may have different dosing patterns. People may be pretty adherent with these blue and red circles, and then all of a sudden there's a week where somebody's fallen off your trial and has stopped taking their medication because there's lots of X's in a row. And wouldn't it be great to know about this and be able to intervene and change this if your hope in a clinical trial is to ensure maximal adherence so you can get a good outcome, instead of having somebody drop out of your trial and potentially lose your efficacy? You could really start to intervene and boost and reinforce adherence. And so I wanted to touch with a few minutes we have left around kind of deployment of these things. And you think about kind of this continuum of the clinical trial and how really, you can integrate this thing. And I'm here to say you can do it. If I can do it in patients in an emergency department that I don't know well who are using opioids and fell and just broke a bone, you can do it for heart failure or diabetes. And so I think there's key points within kind of this continuum around enrollment of participants and how we talk about this technology, what you kind of do during study procedures. And I think the data analysis is, I think, the real open place where I think we'll have a lot of really interesting data come out of these ingestible sensors. As I alluded to, I think during the enrollment process, it's very important to train participants in the operation of something like the IDCAP. The way we do it is we have in-person training plus an asynchronous, about a 1-week startup period, and we find that it works really well. Patients really get it, and they well at the end of that week. So I think there's a simple training program that you can implement in these studies. And then there's a few other considerations really to think about. What do you want to do with non-adherence events? Because, one of the really exciting parts about the technology, as we've talked about today, is that you can know in real time if somebody took their medication or not. Right. And that kind of brings with it the concept of what do you do about that? Is that an observation that people want to look at the end of a trial, or is this become a new space, which is something that I'm very interested in how you can develop interventions that start to enhance or preserve adherence before non-adherence occurs. Obviously, in your study procedures, conducting follow-up visits and assessment of adherence really changes. Now, instead of having pill counts or looking at, a patient diary, we have real-time direct measure of adherence. And I think it's very powerful. And in study visits, this data can be used to help people retain in trials and help people continue to be adherent during studies. And then finally, in the data, I think there's a lot around what do we do in terms of patterns of ingestion? Are we looking? I think somebody asked a question about: are you just simulating 100% maximal ideal adherence rate when we know in the real world it's not like that? Well, I think it depends on what you want to do in your clinical trial. So, potentially it may be interesting to look at what a real world ingestion pattern is like. So, as we talked about during the study procedures, maybe you decide you don't want to intervene when you see non-adherence, but you want to know that it happens and see what happens to the drug and what happens to outcomes when people are, not in the guises of a clinical trial. So it's almost the ability to kind of understand and passively look at this data without people knowing that you're doing it. And so I think I'll end with just a few screenshots of what this interface looks like, because I think this is really illustrative. This is one of our study participants who was using PrEP. And you can see this person has a very regimented routine and takes their medication in the evening, essentially every day of the week. And so this patient was highly adherent, and you can see this data, and I think it's very striking to look at this. And then you see the same patient over the course of, this a little bit later in the study, and all of a sudden these red X's are essentially days where a medication ingestion event is not detected. And you start to see that there's some waning non-adherence. And then there's a passage of 5 days where the patient is completely non-adherent. I think this kind of illustrates a point that, in a clinical trial where if you're looking for maximal adherence, or you're interested in seeing how people are actually taking your medications, now it's not, asking people or asking someone to keep a diary. You can tell the difference between something like this and something like this. And I think that gives you the opportunity to really gain better insight, conduct a better clinical trial, and potentially get some better data. So with that, I'd like to conclude, and I'd love to thank, the places that we work and our study participants at Fedway and to Brigham, etect obviously for inviting us, and our funders at Gilead and at NIDA, who, without them, we wouldn't be here. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to you, Scott.